I was nothing more than the unacknowledged, illegitimate son of the president. Yet I personally orchestrated a security crisis in Washington, D.C., sent my own brother to his doom, and forced that old fox, a man whose words could drive a four-star general to suicide, to publicly declare my mother his first wife in spirit. Even the people in the White House who despise me most now have to kneel on Capitol Hill, chanting my name, calling me Your Excellency, the youngest president, and are even willing to respectfully hand over the power of life and death over 50 Army divisions. But I wasn't satisfied. This taste of power wasn't intoxicating enough. I wanted the throne of a president for life. I wanted to turn the entire nation into my personal chessboard and bring the most intelligent, dangerous, and untamable women under my command. I had discovered long ago that the real players in this seemingly mighty superpower were never the idiotic men in suits, but the brilliant madwomen they called their first ladies. I wanted to be president for life because my father, the president, had it way too damn good. With a single sentence, he could make a general commanding 1,000,000 soldiers put a gun to his own head in the middle of the Oval Office. A single drawn-out "I was wrong" was enough to win back a woman's love after 2 decades of neglect and betrayal. Everyone treated his words as holy writ, even though he was a complete fool who followed his gut instead of his brain. My mother, however, disagreed. She called me a product of a failed marriage, a political accident. She said that even if I made it to the Oval Office, I'd still be the unacknowledged son, the kind of loose and the real First Lady could have quietly eliminated. But I truly, desperately wanted to be president. So I engineered the security crisis in D.C. I dealt with my brother along the way and forced my father to publicly declare my mother as his one true love, his spiritual first wife, even if the law said otherwise. Just like that, I became the rightful heir. Now, looking down at the cabinet members and congressional leaders, they chanted my name in unison, and a thrill shot up my spine. This ridiculous, intoxicating power was finally mine. In my first year after the inauguration, the top item on my agenda was a nationwide talent search, my version of a cabinet selection. In my entire life, the only man who ever left a lasting impression on me was my father. But the list of unforgettable women was a mile long. Growing up in the White House, I'd seen them all. There was the first lady from the world of assassins who carried on a secret, torrid affair with the female head of a South American cartel. The first lady of medicine, a world-renowned surgeon. The first lady of high drama, who survived more scandals than a daytime soap opera and came back stronger each time. There were so many of them, more than I could count. My father spent his days wasting time on a string of affairs. The briefing materials stacked up to the ceiling, yet he couldn't be bothered to turn a single page. And still, the country ran itself, its economy booming, defying all logic. After thinking it over, I came to a conclusion. It had to be these women, using their extraordinary talents, who were pulling the strings of the government from behind the scenes. If they could keep the entire nation stable for my father, then surely they could help me build an empire. Filled with this grand ambition, I went to my mother's residence in the East Wing for her counsel. Ever since my little coup, her mind had become unstable. She would mutter obsessively about legitimacy and bloodline. She never told me not to proceed, though, so I took her silence as consent. On the day of the final selections, I sat in the Oval Office, wound-tight with anticipation. The first candidate to step forward was dressed simply, yet she carried an air of confidence that was impossible to ignore. Dr. Miriam Reed, she said, introducing herself without waiting for me to speak, and placed a small briefcase on my desk. "Mr. President, I'd like you to take a look at this." Inside the case was a small container of dark gray powder. I watched, intrigued, as she poured the powder into a beaker of water, stirred it, then cured the mixture with a small ultraviolet light. In less than a minute, the paste transformed into a block of material as hard as steel. "I call it astrolith," she said. "It hardens instantly on contact with water and becomes nearly indestructible. Perfect for reinforcing critical infrastructure or building a border wall that actually works. Pave the highways with this, and bad weather would never again disrupt traffic. Commercial shipping efficiency would increase tenfold at least." I leaned in for a closer look, but she was already presenting her next invention. It was a siphoning device that could transport massive volumes of water without an external power source, designed specifically for our drought-stricken states. Next came a genetically modified seed that could triple crop yields. With each item, she laid out its applications and impact with perfect clarity. We could use the astrolith to seal the border completely, then use the GM seeds to fill our strategic food reserves. Within 3 years, she projected the nation's GDP could double. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had been right. This was the secret, the foundation of a global superpower, a skyrocketing economy, a legacy of glory fit for the history books. All of it was was laid out right in front of me. I was about to offer her a permanent position, not just in my cabinet, but in my life. But then she looked up, her gaze so intense, it was almost hard to meet. But technology, no matter how powerful, must serve the people, she said. I implore you, Mr. President, to advance a new constitutional amendment, abolish the Electoral College, establish comprehensive and equitable funding for public education, and guarantee every citizen the right to a world-class education. She took a deep breath. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal. The room fell so silent you could have heard a pin drop. The smile froze on my face. The woman was a genius, no question about it. But equality for all? Everyone gets a share in this? Do you have any idea what I went through to become president? My chief of staff leaned in and whispered, "Sir, in your father's escapades, the most anyone ever asked for was lifetime alimony. This woman wants to amend the Constitution and overhaul the entire electoral system. Isn't that a bit much?" I found myself nodding, a bitter taste of disappointment rising in me. Damn it. I guess her other brilliant ideas would have to be extracted by the team at Langley. I was about to signal the Secret Service to show her out when a cool, confident voice sliced through the tension. "Dr. Reed, you're wrong." The speaker was a woman in a bespoke suit, her every movement radiating the effortless confidence of old money and an Ivy League education. It was Sophia Walton, the daughter of the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury. "Radical change must flow with the current of the times, not fight against it," she said. "Our borders are not yet secure. The Treasury is far from full, and the old political dynasties still wield enormous power. In a situation like this, if you try to force absolute equality, you will only shatter the existing order. When the nation plunges into chaos, Dr. Reed, won't you be the one history condemns?" Miriam Reed's face went pale, and she glared at Sophia. Sophia didn't even grant her a sideways glance, turning instead to me, her eyes clear and composed. "I, Sophia Walton, believe we should first use this new technology to secure the nation and enrich our people. Governing a great nation is like slow cooking a fine meal. Lift the lid too soon, and you ruin the entire dish." Excellent, I thought. Brilliant, perceptive, and perfectly measured. I began to applaud. "Effective immediately, Dr. Miriam Reed, you are appointed my special advisor for innovation. And Miss Walton, you will serve as my special advisor for strategy." Seeing the defiant look still on Miriam's face, I dangled a carrot. "Miriam, the day you convince Sophia to see things your way is the day I'll seriously consider your constitutional amendment." That single sentence was all it took to ignite her competitive fire. She shot Sophia a fierce look. "You're nothing but a fossil from the old establishment. Give me 3 days, and I'll make you regret the day you were born." Sophia remained unruffled. "And you're just a naive idealist straight out of a textbook. What makes you think you can win against someone born and bred in the DC swamp?" Ever since I brought Miriam and Sophia into my inner circle, life at the White House became infinitely more entertaining. They were like frenemies from a classic sitcom, and their every debate was a masterclass in strategy versus innovation. Pushed constantly by Sophia's pragmatism, Miriam began churning out new inventions at a phenomenal rate, as if she'd unlocked a cheat code. And I, at last, was experiencing life on easy mode. All I had to do was sign off on their projects, sit back in the Oval Office, and watch the nation's strength soar. Simply by surrounding myself with brilliant women, I was being hailed as a visionary leader. It was the life I had always dreamed of. But as they say, good fortune often comes with a price. Miriam was a genius, yes, but every one of her breathtaking creations burned through mountains of cash. I stared at the budget report from the Treasury Secretary, my temples throbbing. The national coffers were nearly empty. Just then, a top priority alert arrived from the Northern Command. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Colton, was returning triumphant. The campaign he had led had finally stabilized the volatile northern border. I was in high spirits and decided to greet him personally, bringing a delegation of cabinet members and congressional leaders to the Air Force Base. But when we arrived, we saw the 4-star general disembarking from the transport plane with a plainly dressed young woman in his arms. She was heavily pregnant, and the two of them were all over each other like teenagers in love, completely oblivious to the crowd of the nation's highest-ranking officials gathered to welcome them. Right there, in front of everyone, General Colton descended the ramp, dropped to one knee, and addressed me loudly. "Mr. President, the mission is complete. The northern threat has been neutralized. For my service, I ask for no medals, no commendations, and no promotions. I wish to trade the entire merit of this victory for a single favor. I ask that you grant the woman by my side, Brenda, an official title, acknowledging her as my partner and giving her the same legal standing as my wife, Audrey." A sharp, collective gasp went through the crowd. The politicians beside me were visibly shocked, and a buzz of whispers erupted from the press press corps, trading a historic military victory for official recognition of his mistress. It was a soap opera plot come to life. I watched the scene unfold, my face a perfect mask of neutrality. Amateurs. I grew up in the White House. I'd seen this exact type of drama play out 1,000 times. General Colton, I began, my voice even. Your willingness to risk your career for a woman is very moving. However, I prefer not to act on one-sided stories. A marriage, after all, involves more than one person. I'm quite curious to hear what your wife thinks of this arrangement. Colton seemed to have anticipated the question, his expression not of guilt, but of pure self-righteousness. Mr. President, my wife, Audrey, comes from the corporate world. She's rigid, old-fashioned, and utterly devoid of passion. Her only concern is running her family's business empire. We have nothing in common. In all our years of marriage, she hasn't even given me a child. But Brenda, she may be a simple country girl, but she's brave and passionate. She loves me for me, and she is carrying my child. I can't live without her. I've already sent Audrey an iMessage, he said, his tone firm and confident. I told her to be sensible, to know her place, and not to make a scene. I'm sure she'll agree in the end. Even if she doesn't want to, she will. I see, I said, my tone still level. I turned to an aide. Get Audrey Ross on a video call. Better yet, have her come here in person. That won't be necessary, Mr. President. I'm already here. As I finished speaking, a slender figure stepped out from the crowd. She wore a perfectly tailored suit, and though she wore no makeup, she possessed a clean, striking beauty and a refined air. Her eyes met mine, and she gave a slight, respectful nod. Audrey, I didn't realize you were here, I said. You heard the general's request. He wants to trade his entire victory to give this woman, Brenda, a formal status equal to your own. What are your thoughts? Audrey lifted her chin, her gaze sweeping over General Colton. He was clutching Brenda's hand, looking at his wife of many years as if she were a complete stranger. Audrey's eyes returned to mine. Mr. President, since marrying into the Colton family, I have dutifully fulfilled my role as a wife and managed the family's affairs. While my husband was at the front, I single-handedly ran the entire Colton political machine. I was responsible for the livelihoods of hundreds of staffers and their families, and I did not take a single day off. The Colton family's political action committee has been running at a deficit for years. To prevent their influence from collapsing, I have spent the last 5 years quietly subsidizing it with my own personal trust and investment returns. To maintain this family's public image and allow my husband to pursue his career without distraction, I have personally contributed a total of $137 million. She paused for a moment. As for the matter of children, the general and I have slept in separate rooms since our wedding night. That was hardly a decision I could make on my own. Her voice remained steady. When it comes to the Colton family legacy, and in the eyes of the military families my husband commands, my conscience is clear. I never imagined that my 5 years of sacrifice and stewardship would be repaid with such a public humiliation. Her voice suddenly grew sharp as a razor. I no longer have any feelings for him. I formally request, Mr. President, that you grant my divorce from General Mark Colton immediately. The crowd erupted. General Colton's eyes bulged as if he were seeing his wife for the very first time. He opened his mouth to speak, but her icy stare made him swallow his words. A mortified flush spread across his face, and he stood there, completely stunned and helpless. I, on the other hand, was ecstatic. A woman who could single-handedly run a massive political dynasty and personally inject over $100 million to keep it afloat? She was the perfect candidate to manage the nation's finances. Divorce granted, I declared, striding forward to offer Audrey my hand. And Audrey, if you're free this evening, I was wondering if you would do me the honor of having dinner with me. She froze, staring at me, an expression of utter disbelief on her face, as if she couldn't have heard me correctly. I met her gaze, my smile unwavering. My team is in desperate need of someone with your intelligence and sharp eye to manage the nation's finances. I can't imagine anyone more qualified. Before Audrey could fully process it, her personal assistant was already overcome with emotion, tears welling in her eyes. Ma'am, she whispered urgently, the president personally grants your divorce and then immediately asks you to dinner. It's so obvious. He must have been in love with you for years, but he never dared to say anything because of the general's influence. Seeing you treated this way, he couldn't stand it any longer, so he stepped in for you, right here in public. He wouldn't risk his reputation to defend you if he didn't love you. Congratulations, Mom. You finally found a man who deserves you. The surrounding politicians and reporters immediately bought the story wholesale. I never knew the president was such a romantic, someone murmured. General Colton is going to regret this for the rest of his life, throwing away a wife like that. She was clearly the one the president had wanted all along. It just proved the general had a diamond at home and treated it like broken glass. The man was blind. Say yes. Say yes, a chorus of voices urged. Amid the roaring wave of encouragement, Audrey took a deep breath breath, the last flicker of hesitation in her eyes replaced by solid resolve. She turned back to me and inclined her head. Audrey Ross, thank you for your kindness, Mr. President. You offer me sanctuary when I had nowhere else to turn. It would be my honor to serve you in any way I can. Excellent, I said with a laugh, taking her by the arm. Please rise, Audrey. As of today, you are my special advisor for the Treasury. The moment my hand touched her arm, the color drained from General Colton's face. It was as if a switch had flipped in his brain, and every memory of Audrey's years of sacrifice came rushing back. The regret was beginning to set in. Mr. President, you can't. Colton dropped to his knees, his face a mask of panic. Sir, I was wrong. I take it all back. I don't want another partner. I don't want the medals or the promotion. Just please, I'm begging you, give Audrey back to me. I swear I'll change. I'll treat her right from now on. Realizing her fantasy was collapsing, Brenda knelt beside him, sobbing hysterically. Mr. President, the General and I are really in love. Please don't tear us apart. I looked down at them, filled with a profound sense of boredom. I'd seen this show since I was a child, and I was tired of it. It was the classic, pathetic melodrama. A man throws away a brilliant woman, and only when someone else sees her value does he realize he can't live without her, begging on his knees for a second chance. Pathetic. A complete waste of his position. I would never make such an amateur mistake. The worst part about these little dramas is that 9 times out of 10, the woman softens and takes the man back. And I had just found the perfect person to run the nation's treasury. I wasn't about to give her up. I tightened my arm around Audrey's waist, my gaze turning to ice. General Mark Colton, your service in this campaign should have earned you the highest honors. But your arrogance and appalling lack of judgment have nullified them entirely. As for this woman, Brenda, she conspired with you to undermine the authority and dignity of this office. Neither of you deserves forgiveness. Agents y Comanda. Several Secret Service agents stepped forward. Take General Colton and Miss Brenda into custody. Deal with them quietly and efficiently. With a series of sharp clicks, the elite soldiers who had accompanied Colton raised their rifles, surrounding their own general. The blood drained from Colton's face. No, Mr. President, I was rambling. I wasn't thinking, he stammered. Please look at my record. Consider the 50 divisions under my command in the North. Just give me one more chance. 50 divisions mean nothing. I thundered, my patience gone. I am the President of the United States of America. Are you telling me, in front of the entire national leadership, that you intend to defy a direct order? I'm ordering you to clean up your own mess, General. I know it's difficult, but that is a military command. A visible tremor ran down Colton's spine. His face was a mask of despair as he finally drew his service pistol. He pressed the muzzle to his temple. Before he pulled the trigger, he looked at Audrey one last time, his eyes filled with a desperate, all-consuming love. My new special advisor for the Treasury merely watched him, her expression as placid as a frozen lake. And when she was certain the last flicker of hope in his eyes had died, there was a single shot. The sound cracked across the tarmac and echoed into silence. Brenda collapsed to the ground, her shrieks turning into incoherent wails. As her sobs faded, I turned and personally escorted my newest advisor back to the White House. Mr. President, you have to settle this, Miriam protested. My high-yield grain initiative could solve world hunger if we just rolled it out. So why does Sophia always have to find problems with it? Miriam stood before me, holding a sheaf of golden wheat. Her cheeks puffed in indignation. Sophia snorted. Anyone can double a yield. What about storage, transportation, distribution? Do you have any idea how many corrupt middlemen and local officials will be lining their pockets? In the end, agribusiness megacorporations will make a fortune, while the Treasury and the people get fleeced. Your miracle grain is nothing more than fertilizer for a new crop of grifters. My Treasury advisor, Audrey, rubbed her temples and slapped a ledger down on the coffee table. Could you two keep it down? Miriam, your research and development department was $30 million over budget last month. I am stretching every single dollar, and you're spending it like it's water. Already furious, Miriam turned on Audrey Ross. So what if I went a little over your precious budget? This project could benefit all of humanity. There are people all over the world who would kill to fund my research. With the sound of my 3 advisors arguing as my backdrop, I calmly allowed my valet to help me into my suit jacket. It was time for the day's cabinet meeting. Another busy, chaotic day. The atmosphere in the cabinet room was somber as the department heads rose to their feet. But as I opened the latest tax revenue report from the Treasury, my own mood darkened. Audrey's concerns had not been exaggerated. On paper, money was flowing into the Treasury, but corruption, from the federal level down to the local, was spreading like a cancer that resisted any attempt to excise it. Finding a way to surgically remove these parasites was a monumental task. As I pondered this, a young official stood up from the back of the room. She was dressed in an unremarkable, off-the-rack suit. But when she spoke, her voice was tight with a barely contained fury. "Mr. President, I wish to file a grievance." Every eye in the room turned to her. She was small, with gentle features, but her gaze was startlingly sharp, like a burning flame. "Go on," I said with a wave of my hand. "My grievance is with every single person in this room, including you, Mr. President." Her words landed like a bomb. The room fell deathly silent. "Outrageous." A senior cabinet secretary slammed his hand on the table. Who was this insolent girl, slandering the president? But the young official didn't flinch. She stood even taller, her voice firm. "Slander? Then allow me to ask you, Mr. President, after Congress approved $800 million for disaster relief, do you know why? Thousands of people in Louisiana are still homeless, starving, and cold. It's because $500 million of that $800 million was skimmed off the top by the governor and his network of cronies. And let me ask you another question, Mr. President. Why, with a record defense budget, are our soldiers on the northern border wearing worn-out uniforms and using outdated equipment? It's because the Pentagon and its contractors are in bed together, approving shoddy materials in exchange for kickbacks. And that tax report," she said, pointing directly at the file in my hands. "The tariff revenue looks wonderful on paper, but in reality, your so-called regulatory bodies have become extortion rackets for major corporations. Public anger is at a boiling point, and the Treasury is only seeing a fraction of the money it's owed." With every accusation she leveled, my heart beat faster. I wasn't completely unaware of these issues, but I had always lacked the concrete evidence to make a move. This woman, however, laid it all out with chilling precision, as if she was reading from a script. "You sit here in the White House, Mr. President, but do you have any idea what people are saying about you?" She looked me straight in the eye, her gaze a mixture of disappointment and challenge. "They say this president has the ambition to make the nation strong, but not the courage to cut out the corruption. They say if this continues, soon there won't be a nation left worth governing." "That's enough," the head of my Secret Service detail growled, his hand moving to his sidearm, waiting for my signal. But even with that threat, the young official held her head high. "I may be a woman, but I am a patriot. And if my word can serve as a warning to this administration, then my life is a price I'm willing to pay." The moment she said it, she froze, clapping a hand over her mouth as the color drained from her face. The cabinet room fell silent once more. "A woman." The cabinet members stared, finally noticing the lack of an Adam's apple, the slenderness of her frame. She was, in fact, a woman who had disguised herself as a man to enter the federal government. A woman holding a federal office? It's a flagrant violation of tradition, an old-school senator sputtered, clutching his chest. "You're right," I said, nodding. "It would be an absolute waste to let a woman this brilliant languish in a boring bureaucratic post. I'm appointing you as my special advisor." The woman stared at me, dumbfounded. Special advisor. As the words sank in, a deep blush spread from her neck to the tips of her ears. "Mr. President, the White House isn't the place for me. I'd rather you shoot me than stick me behind a desk." "My dear advisor, you misunderstand," I explained patiently. "I run this country on Advisor Reed's ingenuity, Advisor Walton's strategy, and Advisor Ross's financial acumen. These men can argue from dusk until dawn and still not accomplish a single thing. Is a full night of their posturing worth one sentence of the truth you just spoke?" My words seemed to leave her speechless. She glanced around the cabinet room, a look of dawning realization in her eyes. These guys really were useless. Seeing my opening, I pressed my advantage. "Tell me your name. I'll have HR draw up the appointment immediately. The press office will prepare the announcement. As of today, you are my special advisor for oversight. You will report only to me, and your sole mission is to root out the corruption in this government, inch by inch." My newest advisor looked up at me, her eyes a whirlwind of shock, confusion, and an irrepressible spark of excitement. It was the thrill of finally being seen for who she was. After a long moment, she found her voice. "My name is Clara Jensen. Mr. President, I accept." My new oversight advisor, Clara Jensen, was a prodigy. She barely had to leave her office. Working from sheer intuition and a vast, nationwide network of informants, she could pinpoint corruption with the precision of a surgeon, targeting every pocket of graft. I acted on her intelligence, launching one investigation after another. Before long, the government was running cleaner than ever, and the Treasury was overflowing. The nation was on the cusp of a golden age. And then, crisis struck. I was relaxing in Miriam's lab in the West Wing when the sound of explosions and roaring engines shook the building. An aide burst in, his face white as a sheet. "Mr. President, it's terrible. The Northern Coalition, their Khan, is leading a million-man army. They've broken through our border defenses and surrounded the city. D.C. is under siege." "What?" I shot to my feet. General Colton was dead, and his successor hadn't had time to consolidate his command or rally the troops. How could the enemy have advanced so quickly? But in contrast to my shock, Miriam's eyes lit up with a frightening intensity. She grabbed my arm, her voice buzzing with an almost manic excitement. Mr. President, this is it. This is our chance. My new tactical drones, the particle beam weapons, they're all just collecting dust in storage. Just give the word, and I'll deploy the entire weapons system to the city's perimeter. We can blast that barbarian horde into a crater and demonstrate our military power to the entire world. She started to rush out, ready to give the order herself. Wait, I said, holding up a hand to stop her, my mind racing. The Northern Coalition was formidable, true, but they were technologically primitive. There was no way they could have breached our defenses and reached DC this fast on their own. Not unless someone on the inside showed them the way. An idea sparked in my mind. Tell me, I asked the aide by the con side, the enemy commander, did you see a woman? The aide paused, searching his memory. I think I did, Mr. President. She was on a white horse, right next to him. She didn't look like she was one of them. She looked American, just as I thought, I said with a smile, my anxiety evaporating. I straightened my tie and ordered a message be sent to the invading army. Open the gates. I'm going out to greet our guests personally. Mr. President, no. Miriam cried. Opening the gates now is suicide. Are you insane? But I was perfectly calm, completely confident. Relax, my dear advisor, I said with a grin. Keep the coffee warm. I'll be right back. With only a small Secret Service detail for an escort, I walked calmly out beyond the city's defensive perimeter. I stood before a seemingly endless army. At its head was a tall, powerfully built man on a massive warhorse, the Khan of the Northern Coalition. And just as the aide had described, a woman was at his side. She wore a suit of silver-plated armor, a stark contrast to the grim, rugged horde behind her. Her face was beautiful, but it was carved with a profound sadness and a stubbornness that she could not hide. Seeing me emerge from the city, the Khan was momentarily stunned. Then he roared in halting English, President of America, you are brave. I have brought 1 million warriors. Surrender now, and I will spare the people of your city. I paid him no mind, my eyes fixed on the woman in the silver armor. You know, I said, my voice soft, you look familiar. The woman flinched, her eyes widening in disbelief as she looked at me. After a moment, tears filled her eyes and her voice caught in her throat. Mr. President, I have been reborn. In my last life, I was one of your advisors. You listened to lies and slander, and you had me executed, left to freeze to death in the wilderness. In this life, I fled to the desolate north, and there I found a man who truly loves me, the Khan. I have brought his million soldiers here not for power or revenge. I only wanted to stand before you and hear you say you were sorry. I am sorry, I said without a moment's hesitation. I stepped forward and took her hand. In that life, I was a fool. I was blind. This time, I swear, I will not fail you again. Her name finally floated up from the depths of my memory. Isabella. Isabella stood frozen for a second. Then she threw herself into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. All the years of resentment and hatred she had harbored simply melted away in the face of my apology. The Khan, seeing this, flew into a rage. President of America, what trick is this? Isabella, do not listen to his lies. I continued to ignore him, speaking only to the woman in my arms, my voice earnest. Isabella, I was the one who hurt you. If you still have anger in your heart, let fall on me alone. But the people of this nation are innocent. Why should millions of lives be sacrificed to settle a personal score between us? All I ask is that you persuade the Khan to withdraw his army. Isabella looked into my sincere eyes, then turned to the enraged Khan, and then to the terrifying million-man army at his back. Her heart was in turmoil. Her only goal had been to make me admit my mistake. Now that I had apologized so readily, what reason was there to continue the invasion? My love, she finally said, turning to the Khan with pleading eyes. He has apologized. Let's go home. Go home. The Khan looked at her in disbelief. Isabella, we have fought and bled to get here. You would throw it all away for a simple apology? He is manipulating you. But he came out himself. Isabella sobbed. He apologized to me in front of everyone. I just wanted justice. Now that I have it, I cannot be responsible for the deaths of countless people. I let out a long sigh, feigning a look of admiration and regret. Miss Vance, your compassion is admirable. But unfortunately, even if the Khan agrees to withdraw for you today, what about tomorrow? What happens when his resentment festers? He could invade again at any time for any reason. A sword will forever hang over this border, and the people of the North will never know peace. My words struck Isabella like a physical blow, amplifying her guilt tenfold. She knew the Khan was a volatile and passionate man. Even if he he agreed to retreat today, he would be doing so reluctantly. If war erupted again later, wouldn't it be her fault? She grabbed the Khan's arm, her voice begging. My love, you said you did all this for me. Then look at me and swear that you will never invade the South again, that you will live in peace with this nation. If you cannot, if you break that oath, I will never see you again. The Khan looked at the weeping woman before him, and his heart felt as if it were being torn in two. Retreat? His ambition was to conquer the world. How could he simply turn back? But if he didn't, he would lose Isabella. And what was the point of conquering the world if he had no one to share it with? He glared at me, his eyes burning with a mixture of hatred and defeat, and for a long moment, he said nothing. Then, he threw his head back and let out a roar that seemed to tear the sky apart. Isabella, my love for you is as vast as the heavens. If I order a retreat today, my warriors will eventually resent me and turn against me. War will come again, and you will be blamed for it for the rest of your life. Since what you desire most is true and lasting peace. As he spoke, he drew the golden scimitar from his belt, and before anyone could stop him, pressed it to his own throat. Warriors of the North, he roared, ride with your Khan into the eternal hereafter. Before the words had even left his lips, there was a flash of steel and a torrent of blood erupted from his neck. No, Isabella shrieked, a sound torn from her very soul, and rushed toward the Khan's falling body. Her scream shattered the sudden silence. What followed was even more horrific. As if by a single silent command, the 1,000,000 warriors of the Northern Coalition drew their blades and, without hesitation, cut their own throats. In an instant, the fields outside the city became a sea of blood. The metallic stench was so thick you could taste it. I moved quickly, pulling the collapsing Isabella into my arms. Isabella, I said softly, I'm so sorry for your loss. The Khan sacrificed himself for you. His love was deeper than anyone's. Don't worry, I assured her. I will give him a state funeral with the highest honors. I will announce to the world that our nation and the surviving people of the North will be allies forever. We will open up trade and honor the peace he bought with his life. Once she was calm, I issued a new set of orders. The city garrison was to secure all enemy weapons and horses. The 1,000,000 corpses were to be cremated immediately and the ashes buried to prevent disease. The entire battlefield was to be sanitized and cleared. Holding a beautiful woman in my arms, looking out over a field of 1,000,000 bodies that had fallen at my unspoken command, I understood for the first time the true meaning of absolute power. The feeling was intoxicating. After officially adding my new special advisor for diplomacy, Isabella Vance, to my team, my hold on the presidency was finally secure. With the bulk of the Northern Coalition's forces dead outside the capital, a massive power vacuum had opened up on our northern border. Without firing a single shot, we had pushed our border out by thousands of miles, nearly doubling the nation's territory. Even the new young Khan, after a few quiet conversations with Isabella, publicly renounced his father's ambitions and pledged his allegiance to our nation. From then on, I was not just the president of the United States, but the supreme leader acknowledged by all the northern tribes. With my team of brilliant advisors, my control was absolute, and the nation prospered beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Decades passed in the blink of an eye. Fusion power became commonplace, and quantum computing connected the entire planet in a single network. Decades passed. Fusion power became commonplace, and quantum computing connected the entire planet in a single network. More decades went by. A silver-haired Miriam Reed, frail and slow, approached my deathbed. She held a document titled, A Proposal for Social Equality and the Redistribution of Power, 81st Revision. Beside her stood an equally white-haired Sophia Walton, her gaze still fixed intently on her old rival. Sophia's lips twitched as if by old habit she was about to argue, but she said nothing, only giving a slight shake of her head. Audrey, Clara, and Isabella were there as well, and all their eyes were on me. With my advisors, my family, watching, I raised a trembling hand and patted the thick document. All right, I rasped. I approve it. Do exactly as it says, Miriam. Don't hold anything back. Miriam was stunned. Mr. President, are you serious? I always thought, she murmured, that you were just dangling that carrot to keep me here. I managed a weak smile, my thoughts drifting back across the years. Let me tell you all a secret. When it comes right down to it, I was always the illegitimate president. The words hung in the air. It wasn't just Miriam. Everyone in the room stared at me, their faces masks of disbelief. I paid them no mind and continued in a slow, steady voice. To become the legitimate heir, I staged a coup, eliminated my brother, and forced my father to rewrite history. It was then I understood that the rules everyone lives by are nothing more than stories told for too long. And stories can be broken. If I could break the rules of succession, what was to stop a popular general from doing the same to me? What was to stop a desperate aide from putting a knife to my throat in the dead of night? To secure my power, I kept that secret for my entire life. life. The only people I ever told were my children, the heirs who carried all my hopes. But of my 14 children, not one of them understood. Every single one was a slave to their emotions. My sons would throw away their birthright for a pretty face. My daughters would endure any humiliation for the sake of a man. They were all utterly, hopelessly useless. And it wasn't just them. The entire political class was the same. Generals trading national security for a mistress. Cabinet secretaries throwing away their careers for an old lover. It was then that I truly understood. In this whole, insane world, I was the only one who was thinking clearly. My gaze swept slowly across the faces of my advisors. My friends. My eyes came to rest again on Miriam's proposal. To leave the country in the hands of fools blinded by emotion would be to sentence it to an endless cycle of incompetence. I would not stand by and watch that happen. So I would shatter the old system to pieces. I would educate the masses and let the truly capable rise to the top on their own merit. I paused, my gaze drifting to the window, where the sunset painted the sky in gold and crimson. Besides, I am dying anyway. Once I'm gone, what do I care if the world burns to ash? My final words fell softly into the quiet room. I closed my eyes, my mind filled with the echoes of a lifetime of arguments and laughter. This absurd, magnificent life on easy mode. I was content. As for the future of the world, I'll let the next generation figure it out. Reading to this point, we feel as though we have accompanied this illegitimate president through a thrilling, exhilarating, high-stakes gamble of a life. We may have been shocked by his ruthlessness in breaking the rules, admired his strategic genius in managing his brilliant team, and been left to ponder his final, seemingly contradictory decision. On the surface, this is a story of ultimate fantasy about power, ambition, and conquest. But when we peel back the adrenaline-fueled plot, we find at its core an exploration of a question relevant to us all. When we gain the power to define the rules, do we choose to reinforce the old order or to create new possibilities? The protagonist transforms from an accident excluded by the rules into the rulemaker himself. His entire life is spent exploiting and subverting the human weaknesses he perceives those idiotic men bound by emotion, desire, and tradition. Yet, standing at the pinnacle of power, he looks back only to find that his greatest creation, this impregnable empire, is poised to become the next rigid prison of rules, and his own heirs have failed to escape the very human failings he so despised. This may be the story's most profound question for us. Is his final choice the utter disappointment of a dying king in his mediocre successors, an ultimate act of hubris in the vein of After Me, the Deluge, or a form of the coldest, purest foresight honed over a lifetime? He chooses to shatter the very chessboard he built, not out of mercy, but because he understands better than anyone that a system incapable of producing true strength, no matter how prosperous it appears, is already rotten from within. The story doesn't give us a simple label of hero or tyrant. It coolly lays out a panoramic view of human nature. It understands a desire to break the status quo and the fear of losing control that exists within all of us. It encourages us to examine the chessboard we find ourselves on, to question whether unexplored potential and injustice lie hidden behind the rules we take for granted. Perhaps true growth lies not in becoming an invincible player on the board, but in having the courage, when we gain power, to question the board itself. To even dare to draw a new, more equitable map for those who come after, even if it means we're no longer the sole winners. This, perhaps, is the ultimate and most benevolent expression of power.